And think about the enthusiasm you see in the stands at Friday Night Lights. And then those exact same human beings pull into the parking lot Monday morning, and that enthusiasm and that passion stays in the parking lot. And to me, that's the crisis, that's the waste, that's the shame. And through no fault of leaders, because they've never been told, how do you address it? How do you create this environment? And there's nobody knocking on their door saying, hey, let's create an environment of engagement. There's nobody demanding that, yet when they do, we see customer service levels go up, profit go up, safety incidents go down, and turnover go down, which takes stress from the organization.
We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey.
Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Looking forward to learning.
Yeah, disengagement in the workplace. I mean, I hear that we have an issue with that. We're going to talk through that today. But I'm curious, how did you get interested in workplace engagement and therefore disengagement?
Yeah, so I had a pretty major shift in life after being a couple of decades as a CEO of multinational companies, and realized that my joy was from seeing people achieve things they didn't think were possible, and then by extension, teams achieving things they didn't think were possible. And I realized that that ability to achieve amazing things is really in part determined by the environment in which they work. And when I looked at these engagement numbers, every single year Gallup comes out, and they came out in end of April, and they said, you know what? Engagement dropped again. Engagement just being, would you recommend this as a place to work? That's the acid test question. And if people say no, it doesn't mean they're unhappy. It just means go find something better. And I thought, what a waste when most of our hours are spent at work and people go, whatever. That's no good. That's a waste of their time. It's a waste of potential. It's a waste of opportunity for business owners. And that's what really drove this interest in this book.
Yeah, I mean, billions of dollars a year, you could argue. And who knows how many hours that computes to of just wasted time. People who could be bringing their best and who are just kind of slouching and giving, only a percentage of what they could bring. You're right. It is a massive, massive waste. And you got your first book that is just about to release, The Buy-in Advantage, Why Employees Stop Caring and How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Give Their All. Like, what leader would not want to bottle this message right here? I'm hearing it from all perspectives, nonprofit, for-profit. So let's just dive in to employee disengagement. It's escalating. Why? Why is this on the rise, Dave?
Yeah, it's on the rise through no one's fault. No one is waking up in the morning saying, boy, I want to create disengagement here. Or employees saying, boy, I really don't want to be engaged at work. It's happened for a variety of factors, some of which are pretty recent, which we call the buy-in crisis. And those factors are, one, when we had the pandemic, people were generally not at the office or were working remotely, and they had a chance to think about what was important to them. And there was a resurgence of focus on values, meaning, why am I bothering to do this? Why am I bothering to drive at work? Why am I bothering not to take care of my kids myself, or whatever it was that caused people to rethink? There's also a new generation, Gen Z, and it's often said, this generation doesn't like to work. These no good people, they're not like us. But in fact, they're just like us, and they said that about us before, so let's get over it. But recognize that for Gen Z, now a significant part of our workforce and increasing, money is part of the answer, but equally important is impact. What impact can I have here? And purpose. Why are we bothering to do this? Why is it important that we do this? And so this purpose and impact message is one that resonates with employees, and they are willing to take a pay cut, contrary to, in order to get what they feel as aligned purpose. In contrast to leaders who have been taught it's all about money. And that message is reinforced When somebody quits and they say the world's greatest lie, they say, "Oh, I got a better job." And yet the data shows people leave generally not for money, unless if they're engaged, it takes at least 30% for them to leave for another job. If they're disengaged, they'll leave for a quarter. And then we hear leaders blame, well, they just left for a quarter an hour. Well, that was because the environment they were in suggested it wasn't worth staying for a quarter an hour.
Yeah, there's so much there. You're talking generations. Are you seeing a difference in any of the generations? I myself am a millennial, called a geriatric millennial, kind of on the edge there. Seeing any generational differences in this engagement or disengagement crisis?
There is not necessarily a difference in engagement levels, except that the latest data from Gallup suggests that young managers and women are shifting to higher disengagement levels more than other groups. And we'll see if that holds. But each generation has different needs. For example, work-life balance is a generation. So each have different needs, but the desire for purpose and having impact is pretty universal. Like, why am I doing this? I want to make a difference in what time I have. And engagement is a word that a lot of leaders go, whatever, I got other stuff to do. But here's a picture for you. Most of your listeners in the U.S. have been to a football game at a high school. And think about that as Friday night lights. And think about the enthusiasm you see in the stands at Friday night lights. And then those exact same human beings pull into the parking lot Monday morning, and that enthusiasm and that passion stays in the parking lot. And to me, that's the crisis, that's the waste, that's the shame. And through no fault of leaders, because they've never been told, how do you address it? How do you create this environment? And there's nobody knocking on their door saying, hey, let's create an environment of engagement. There's nobody demanding that. Yet when they do, we see customer service levels go up, profit go up, safety incidents go down, and turnover go down, which takes stress from the organization. So a lot of good things happen, but the challenge is it doesn't show up in the metrics unless you look for it. It doesn't show up on the balance sheet or the income statement. So we're not reinforced in doing the things that create this environment of greatness.
I'm curious, how is this buy-in crisis connected to the burnout epidemic?
Yeah, I think that they are directly connected in this way. You don't burn out if you are fueled by the purpose of the work you are doing. And also you need to regulate how you do it and how much you take on. But that's prioritization, which is also in the book. One of the rules we have is 3 is greater than 7, which can drive accountants like me crazy, but it's true. If you focus on fewer things, you get more done. And so there is no burnout if we're fueled by the passion of what's important. If we truly, deeply care about the purpose, the compelling purpose of the business, which we talk about in the book, and it is never money. Compelling purpose is never about money. Do I want to be paid? Sure. Is that the reason I do it? If it is, then I'm willing to leave for a quarter an hour. And it's not gratifying work. It's just work to pay the bills.
Yeah, and what do you think's changing with the economy? Pressing and stressing a lot of industries, including a lot of the leaders that I coach, that are just saying, man, we have to do more with less, as things, are very expensive. How do you think this is connected to this economic stress that we're feeling right now?
Great question. For most businesses, people are the number 1 or 2 expense, yet they don't show up on the balance sheet. And if we are able to create an environment of engagement, we're actually able to get more from the resources that we have. If you invite people to contribute in a constructive way, just following a process outlined in the buy-in advantage, you can get people to produce a lot more. And produce means it's not just widgets, it's ideas on what we can stop doing. It's listening to customers for new opportunities. It's spotting obstacles earlier so we can respond. It's getting everybody on the same page so there's less wasted effort. And less wasted effort drops directly to the bottom line. So if we're feeling economic stress, let's do things that are no cost, low cost, and that's working with our people. It only requires time and intention.
I love it. So while we're on that, what's a pathway forward? Leaders are listening to this who are super practical, Dave, and they're like, okay, I'm with you. We need to keep our folks engaged. Retention is key right now. Engagement is key. What are some practical ways that leaders can do that?
Yeah, I have to tell you, as CEO, I would often make the mistake of hearing an idea and get all excited and come back to my team and say, "Team, I've got this great idea. Let me tell you about it." And I describe it and look for their reaction. And I didn't realize that unintentionally I was putting them in a box where their only response could be, "Great idea," or ask me a question about it because I didn't know how to draw them into the conversation. So I think it requires an attitude to take the first step that all of us are smarter than any of us. And so, how do I get a team to address this issue together? And we have an assessment in the book that we would ask you and your team to take and then compare notes because that will tell you the area in which you can begin to have the biggest impact on your engagement. And then the book is chock full of techniques and proven processes that allow you to address whatever area you determine is most important for your company. So one, recognize it's a team effort. It's not a singular effort. It's not up to leaders. It's up to us, the collective, because all of us are smarter than any of us. And then remember, if you come up with 20 ideas, 3 is greater than 7. Just start with 3 and nail them and celebrate and then move on.
Do you have a case study or just a story you'd like to share? Maybe you have a disengaged culture that maybe they're not on the top of the world now, but raised engagement through some intention?
Sure. One of the stories we tell in the book is a company where the general manager of the business came to me and said, "Hey, I have squeezed every dime I can out of this company. We're in times of economic stress. What can I do?" And I said, "What's your turnover?" And it was north of 50%. And I said, "Let's address the turnover." And he used one of the techniques in the book, which basically we call discovery sessions, which basically was asking employee teams, what is it that we can do differently or what is it we can do better? And by listening to employees, he was able to reduce the turnover by about half and drop profits to the bottom line. And that process took about a year. It's not next week, but it yields meaningful results.
So assessment being one kind of gives that specifically, figuring out how you can raise retention. What are a couple other key areas if you're invited in as a consultant to this company? What are a couple key areas you're kind of looking at or at least poking at a little bit?
Yeah, I'm listening to the people who are doing the work. So we start with interviews with the executive team and just say things like, "Hey, what values do you see at play? Not what's on the poster on the wall, but what values do we practice? And how would you describe compelling purpose?" Because compelling purpose and values are used in setting prioritization and used in decision making if they're used correctly. And so also asking, what are the 3 most important things the business needs to get done now? And I will tell you about 80% of the time, the descriptions we hear do not line up, meaning each of the executives has their own interpretation of what the priorities are or how they word the priorities, which means their teams are hearing different interpretations, which means there's a lot of wasted effort in the organization. And so this process might seem cumbersome. It's really not, but it talks to one of our beliefs, which is we need to slow down to speed up. When we can figure out what is our process for decision making, when we can figure out what are the 3 things we're all going to focus on, when we can figure out how we're going to cascade that message and involve the next layer in accomplishing that, then we make things happen.
In the buy-in advantage, you talk about the subtle signs of disengagement. You got to tell me more. What are those subtle signs?
Yeah, there are actually 7 different things. And of 3, we see a lot. One is wages are increasing, talent is leaving. Another is key objectives or measures frequently missed. Another is insidious meetings start late, or meetings run over, or meetings don't address the problems that are most important. And we see that so many times. And most often, that's because we don't have any alignment on how it is we want to deal with problems. And we have a chapter in the book called Drama Free Problem Solving, that it's a process that allows us to all get on the same page. One other thing I point out is, so it's one thing to get your executive team or whatever level you're at working together. It's another to get the next level in the organization. And that is often done well-intentioned by leaders who say, hey, I put out an email and I told them what the objectives were, or I did a town hall and said, any questions? And then people go back to work. And that is not very effective. That is interesting and kind of irrelevant in my day-to-day stuff if I work for you. But thank you for letting me know. I do appreciate it. Different than that is having each team leader go out to their team and say, hey, look, here are the 3 priorities that we came up with as important to the company. I've got a couple of questions for you, my team. One is, what clarifying questions do you have about these objectives? Are they clear? Number 2, how would you see our team involved in accomplishing these objectives? So we co-create, which is the principle of done with, not done to, that we talk about in the book.
Yeah, problem solving. That is a huge deal for every single one of my coaching clients. If you're watching or listening now, you know who you are. And we talk about that a lot. There are lots of problems to be solving right now below the surface in the culture of the company, or above the surface in the economics that are happening, social dynamics, things like that. How do we get shoulder to shoulder with not just our team, the executive team, but like you're talking about 2 or 3 layers down? What are some practical ways to get shoulder to shoulder on that problem solving?
Yeah, I think it begins with the executive team and aligning on how it is we want to address problems. What is the way we're going to do it as a company? And then modeling that behavior and practicing it with each team to cascade it. And I was with a super successful team yesterday, and we were talking about generating conflict, where conflict is actually sharing ideas. It's not fighting, it's sharing ideas, and it's putting all great ideas on the table, which is a concept from Patrick Lencioni that I happen to believe is very accurate. What typically happens is somebody will bring up a problem and a solution in a meeting, and then people will start pinging off that solution, which is totally ineffective. And here's why. Each of us, from our own experience, sees a problem differently, or a different problem related to whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And each of us, from our experience, has a different idea of what great looks like. So it actually is a total waste of time, because then we get into arguments, and it comes down to the person with the most endurance or the biggest title, or they all look to the boss to say, okay, boss, what are we going to do? And that is such a waste of effort. And people just learn to back down and shut up. Different than that is the drama-free problem-solving solution, which is simply, 1, let's identify our desired outcome. We'd like to reduce waste, for example, if we're in a manufacturing setting. Then ask people to, on their own, before any discussion occurs, what's the problem? And you're going to come up with 15 problems. Solving for 15 problems at once is a total waste of time. So just prioritize and pick the one problem that we're going to address first. Then ask, what does great look like? How would I know a great solution when I see it? Not what's the solution, what's on the checklist in my head. If I brought you 10 solutions, you'd know the 3 you like because of the checklist in your head, but I don't know what's on the checklist in your head. So let's agree on what our criteria or what our checklist is for great. Now we have a specific problem we're addressing with a specific checklist we've agreed to. Now you can go to town and brainstorm all day long and then share the brainstorming. But it's tapping into that collective genius, which begins with people answering the question on their own silently before we launch into group growth.
I know this is like asking which of your kids is your favorite, but What part of the book do you think is most helpful to leaders right now in this unique cultural moment?
Two things. One is recognize it's all of us. It's not the we're not the teacher, we're not the decider, we're not the high priest. We are somebody whose job it is to facilitate greatness by providing clear direction, not in how, but in where we're going. So being chief repeating officer, number one. And then number two, to create the environment where people can share their best ideas and are in a trusting environment. So even if they know that idea is not adopted, people won't make fun of them, or they're not going to hear, we already tried that. That won't work, because the leader is using the criteria in their head that's only residing in their head. So it's that collective, it's sharing your criteria and experience, and it's trusting collective genius.
I'm curious, Dave, let's zoom out a little bit. Looking at the future of work, 10 years from now, how do you think work will be different than it is now?
Oh my goodness, I know that I'm wrong on anything I say about the future. So, with that as a caveat, I think that what we'll do is become a lot smarter about how to use tools like AI in the workplace to make our work easier, recognizing that the critical elements of AI are the input you give it and how you evaluate the output, because so many people use AI like they use Google search, and large language models and Google search are totally different tools for totally different purposes. So we'll really get smart about how to use AI as a partner to assist us. I would caution leaders about using AI for answers, because unless they ask the question with an average of about 400 words, they're not going to get answers that are thoughtful. They'll just get answers. So I think here's how workplace changes. AI becomes a lot more important, no surprise there. Our skills need to be how to use tools like AI. I think that we are able to accomplish work in more distributed fashions, and we go back to allowing people to do work from remote locations while using the hybrid model, which research at Stanford says is most effective, where we do some in person and some remotely. So I think that will accelerate, except for the manufacturing environment. And I think leadership will be redefined. That's my hope. That's my dream, to be leaders of culture that produce game-changing results instead of managers telling people what to do.
I love it. And I think that's already happening. I think the companies that are standing out are the ones who, for the last decade, have gone hard on culture, maybe the last 5, but at least the last 10, in some cases, have gone hard on culture. And because of that, they're seeing the output where they now have retention. Instead of having to go forward and build that, they now have leadership prowess. Even the ones that I'm coaching understand leadership could be their advantage in the age where tools are incredible what they can accomplish. So it's going to be a mix-up. It's going to be a shake-up in the next decade, that's for sure. And I'm honestly excited to be part of it.
What is the single biggest barrier you see to engagement when people come to you?
Meetings are a beast right now. I'm doing a lot of helping people reshape what I call their liturgy of meetings. Um, just with a team this last week, doing a training on something completely different. And then that popped up as the number one thing, which makes sense. It's a lot of dollars. It's a lot of hours put together in those meetings. Distributed team across 3 different locations. And so they're asking, is this really worth our time? If so, what would really be worth our time? And the difference between deep work, like you say, the distributed or the hybrid model, what can I do alone, either from a coffee shop, from home, or from a cubicle tucked away somewhere? And then what do we need to try to accomplish together? And how do we get a momentum or an energy or information flow when we're together so that we can then go accomplish our tasks? And I think the wise cultures are understanding on a meeting better be amazing, or people are acting like they're paying attention through their screen, or they're underneath the table texting or whatever. So disengagement's physically happening in front of people's eyes. Meetings are a big deal. I just think empowerment in huge ways, to invite people a layer up, kind of like you were talking about in problem solving, to things that maybe they feel like are beyond their reach. Oh, I'm just a whatever in the org chart, but they're being invited up because of their skill set, because of their desire, whether they can be paid to go up the next level or not. Everybody wants to contribute more. And I just think there's a lot of boredom out there. And then I focus a lot on gatherings, Dave. That will be the third thing of not monologue gatherings, not dialogue gatherings, but what I'm calling trialogue. There's some form of surprise and delight in that experience. And that could be in your meeting where there's something that's funny, or there's something that's deeply connective, or there's something that's unexpected that kind of keeps us guessing with shorter attention spans. And again, I think back to the boredom piece, the disengagement of just, we've kind of seen it all, done it all, and we can't just throw new information at it. So those are three areas I'm really focusing on and seeing rise to the surface.
Awesome. And we see that as well. And, in the buy-in advantage, we talk about overcoming that boredom and using surprise. If we do anniversaries, let's celebrate anniversaries. Here's 5 years, Bill. It becomes a ritual that is tuned out, well-intended and tuned out. So variety becomes really important for leaders to recognize how to do celebrations with variety. And, meetings often suffer from death by updates because I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's like the lazy way to do a meeting is just say, okay, what's the latest from operations? And then everybody tunes out, as opposed to, look, we're going to ask you to submit in a common format 3 sentences about what's going on in operations on the Friday before our Monday meeting. And we'll devote that same time to exceptions, discussions, and problem solving instead of listening to people talk.
Yes. Another meeting that could have been an email is the phrase today. You're right. It comes from a laziness. I encourage and challenge people. What if you could do half as many meetings for half as long? So if every single week you did a 1 hour check-in with this team, what if you did it every other week for 30 minutes? What would have to be true? And use design and innovation to actually say, well, like you say, we'd have to prepare really well. Okay. And then we save it. What can we only do during a meeting while we're together? You talk about engagement. Nobody wants to show up unprepared. So if you have an assignment you were to prepare for ahead of time, that naturally designs it for engagement. Whereas if you're talking about updates, that naturally designs it for disengagement because, I'm going to read the email later on the update thing. So, man, so much we could talk about for hours here. The buy-in advantage, very, very excited for your book. Last question on this. What do you want to hear? A company reaches out with an email, or let's say a CEO reaches out with an email. What's the phrase that you absolutely would love to hear that the buy-in advantage did for them?
You know what? I'd like to hear, wow, we didn't know what was possible, but when we were able to put some of these things into practice, as simple as they seemed, it made a huge difference in our results. We saw turnover go down, but more importantly, people showed up with their full selves. People are contributing. They're excited to be here. There's no more, thank goodness it's Friday. It's thank goodness it's Monday. I love the people I work with. We have fun doing it. It's hard, but we have fun doing it, and we're accomplishing amazing things and smoking the competition.
Love that. More of that. I love this topic. I'm excited to dig in on this book. Dave, keep up the great work. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks. Check out the Buy-in Advantage at buyinbook.com.